is where we get to talk about this really important fair use that I've been alluding to a few times and how that applies for video production students. Okay, fair use is an exemption from U.S. copyright law that in certain circumstances lets people use copyrighted media for what's called fair use. There are 4 factors that can determine fair use. I'm going to talk about each one of them. They are in priority order, so this first factor is the most important factor. You can use copyrighted media if you transform it in some significant way. You've got to take this original work and change it so dramatically that it's not the original work anymore. You've made it into something new. So if you take a movie that's already copyrighted and you change it somehow, and that change is so transformational that you've created a new work of art, then your change is considered fair use, or it can be considered fair use. The movie owner can still sue you and take you to court, and you've got to make your case in court that this is a transformation that falls under fair use, and the movie company can make their case with their high-powered lawyers saying that it's not fair use, and it's up to the judge and the jury to decide. What does transformation mean? Well, change it into something new. I've already talked about. You have so utterly transformed this that it's become something new. Or for journalism or for video students, if you add review to an existing work, like let's say you are making a review of a movie and you use clips from the movie in your review, well, those clips are review and you need the clips in order to make the point of a reviewer, and therefore that's an acceptable transformation. Maybe you're adding commentary to an existing piece of media. You have an existing song that's copyrighted, and you want to add your own commentary about that song, and you're talking or commenting on it while the song's playing in the background. That might be transformational and therefore acceptable under fair use. Criticism also comes under this transformation. If you want to create a new work that criticizes an existing work in some way, that is probably acceptable under fair use because it's a transformation. Finally, a parody, which you're making fun of an existing work. That's acceptable under fair use because your parody, or when you're ridiculing an existing work, you are changing the way people see it. You're trying to transform that work into something new by making fun of it in some way, and that can be acceptable under fair use because of the way you're transforming that work. Notice I keep saying can be acceptable. Ultimately, it's up to the courts to decide whether each example of fair use is truly fair. Talk to your teacher about what you want to do and whether or not that's fair use. Okay, I said there was 4 factors for fair use, and that was the first one. The second one is, does your use of this existing copyrighted media favor facts, and does it favor published sources? So if you're using facts from a newspaper article in order to make a point in your news story, that's probably fair use because it's looking at facts. Whereas if you're using a copyrighted music or movie and you're just showing the movie because you think it's cool, that not so much fair use because it doesn't favor facts, it's more on the narrative or the storytelling side. And then published sources tend to be better for fair use than unpublished sources. If you're publishing someone's diary that's never been published before, that's not so much fair use because that's their personal property. Whereas if it's a published autobiography of a famous person and you're quoting from that autobiography, that's more covered. All right, next factor is how much of the original work do you use? If you show an entire movie and only include a little bit of your own criticism in it, you're not really transforming that work. You've taken the whole piece of work and rebroadcast it. That's not going to be fair use. But if you just use a little piece of it, and if that little piece is not the heart of the work, in fact, you're just focusing on some little detail or showing some little clip, that is more likely to be fair use. The less you use of the original, the better. There's a general rule of thumb that says 10% is acceptable. That's not a legal standard, that's just a general rule. A lot of schools will tell their students 10% is okay, and if your teacher says that, go with what your teacher says, but the quantity that you use makes a difference. And the last factor for fair use is, does your use of this copyrighted media somehow rob the original owner of the ability to make money from their work? In other words, when you post your new work on the internet, is it going to diminish the value of the existing work? It's hard to know whether your use of a copyrighted piece changes its ability to be resold. In other words, steals its value. Um, An important way to think about it is by asking yourself, am I taking away the essential part of this original work? So for instance, if you take the best part of a video and then reuse it and put it in your own video, then you have stolen the best part of that original video, even if it's a small part. Like let's say the ending of a movie, for instance, or the highlight of a video, or if you take the funniest part of a movie or the most exciting part of the movie and then repackage that into your own movie and then distribute that, then you are taking the most essential part of that original piece and reselling it or giving it away for free and therefore robbing the original owners. So ask yourself if what you're using is essential to the original, and if it is, then you're less likely to be able to use it and claim fair use. If you are distributing copyrighted songs to your friends, then you are preventing your friends from paying for those songs, which is robbing the original song creators of their ability to make money from the songs. Likewise, if what you claim is fair use is preventing the original owner to be able to make money from what they have created, then that's probably not going to qualify for fair use. So your fair use should follow all four of these factors. As you can probably tell, it's complicated. Fair use is not easy, even for lawyers to figure out a lot of the time. Please talk with your teacher. Really spend some time going over this with your teacher. Talk about how you want to use some copyrighted media and get your teacher's opinion about whether or not this is going to be appropriate, whether this is going to fly as fair use. And if your school has its own published policy, obviously you'll need to follow that policy. And also keep in mind that when you want to take your finished video and submit it to various competitions, they might have their own policies about what's fair use and what isn't. Some contests are quite restrictive about what they allow in student projects and might not accept your fair use project even if it does follow fair use guidelines. And finally, all media that you use must be properly attributed. In other words, in the credits for your movie, you need to explain what media you used that's copyrighted and who the original source was, and then explain whether it's fair use. And I'll cover that in more detail in another lesson, but you always have to do attribution for your stuff. If you'd like to read more about fair use, there are a couple of links below this video that have got some very good in-depth descriptions of fair use online and lots of examples of real legal cases that have been brought to trial and what the result was. So it'll say what's the original use, what did the court say, and how did they rule, whether it was fair or not fair use according to that court at that time. Some good reading if you really want to get a general sense of what's going to fly and what isn't.